It was a perfect plan. On the night of June 11th, 1962, 3 prisoners broke out of Alcatraz. They made it to the shore of the San Francisco Bay and into the frigid water. Nearly 50 years later, almost every detail of this amazing escape is known, except one. Did they drown in the bay or survive the escape? U.S. Marshals are still on the case, and surprising new evidence is giving the search for the missing Alcatraz fugitives a new life. In Alcatraz prison, the night begins like any other.
Okay, rack 'em.
Quiet. Orderly. But behind the seeming normality, 3 prisoners are about to attempt the impossible. They are going to escape from America's most secure federal penitentiary. A forbidding fortress rising out of the San Francisco Bay, Alcatraz is home to America's most hardened criminals. This is where the likes of Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly do hard time. By the 1960s, prisoners know that Alcatraz is the end of the line. Considered the most secure prison in the United States, the name Alcatraz scares most inmates who arrive here. Pat Mahoney is a former Alcatraz prison guard who also captained the boat that ferried staff and inmates to and from Alcatraz Island. For guards like Mahoney, there was one thing that made Alcatraz next to escape-proof: the water. The frigid bay is just the last line of defense. Inside, there's 1 guard for every 3 prisoners. And outside, barbed wire fences and guard towers ring the cell block. A 200-yard boat-free zone is maintained in the surrounding water. The extra-tight security has earned Alcatraz the nickname, The Rock. But for prisoners Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin, that simply acts as a challenge. Inside the prison walls, everybody dreams of beating escape-proof Alcatraz. Morris and the Anglins are lifelong criminals and sharp-witted escape artists. By the time they arrive on Alcatraz, they've already masterminded dozens of escape attempts at some of America's toughest penitentiaries. But could they take on the toughest of them all? Prisoners spent 24 hours a day searching for a way out. The prisoner's plan begins with the discovery of a single weak point. An old air ventilator located in the roof above B Block isn't sealed with concrete like the others. By dismantling the ductwork, a prisoner could squeeze through the opening and onto the roof. But to get to the ventilator, they have to get out of their cells. Other than the impregnable cell door, a 13 by 24 centimeter metal grate is the only exit point. Just behind the grate is a narrow utility corridor. Pipes snake up the walls, directly to the target ventilator. Get through the grate, and the prisoners can get onto the roof. A network of conspirators provides the necessary tools. They are mostly fellow inmates, employed in the cell house, the kitchen, the laundry, and general maintenance work. Darwin Kuhn is a former Alcatraz inmate. According to Kuhn, John Anglin approaches him one day on the prison yard and says he needs help getting tools. Kuhn tells Anglin he'll do whatever he can to help. They build a drill out of spare machine parts, and they use sharpened cafeteria spoons to dig through the concrete wall. They hide their progress with false grates, meticulously crafted from cardboard sheets and tobacco boxes. It takes months to complete the job. But on the night of June the 11th, they are finally ready to go.
All right, lights out.
But there's another big problem to take care of. Prison guards are constantly patrolling the halls, making official counts of the inmates. If their empty beds are spotted, Morris and the Anglins know the game is up. Their solution is the plan's masterstroke. Using wire frames, plaster, soap, flesh-colored paint, and human hair, the inmates make detailed replicas of their own heads. Clarence Anglin worked in the prison barbershop. The hair for the dummy heads was carried in his pockets. They place them carefully on their pillows and say goodnight to Alcatraz. The plan goes off without a hitch. But there's one final obstacle between the prisoners and freedom: the San Francisco Bay. Morris and the Anglins know other prisoners have made it to the shore, only to drown in the unforgiving bay. The inmates won't stand a chance in the cold and treacherous water. So they come up with a novel alternative to swimming: life jackets and an inflatable raft constructed from raincoats.
John Anglin asked me, he said, "You got a raincoat?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Wear it out in the yard and I'll wear it back in." So that's how he got my raincoat, which wound up in the rubber raft that they made.
It has taken months and more than 50 rubber raincoats to build the watertight vessel.
I'm gonna redo this piece, okay?
Now, a modified concertina inflates the raft.
All right, boy.
But will a handmade, untested raft survive the nearly 3-kilometer journey to the mainland? If the raft fails, Morris and the Anglins will have no choice but to swim for it, and will almost certainly drown. But if it works, they will achieve something that other prisoners have only dreamed of. The Alcatraz escapees head out into the night, braving the San Francisco Bay in their handmade raft. They are never seen again. Almost 50 years later, their spectacular vanishing act has become the stuff of legend.
It was a wonderful escape attempt, and they disappeared. So there's a mystery there.
And for some, this mystery is very much alive. Deputy U.S. Marshal Michael Dyke heads up the ongoing search for Alcatraz fugitives Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin. It's the Marshal's job to track down escaped federal prisoners.
Hey, Kelly, it's Mike from the Marshals.
And they capture tens of thousands every year.
Do you remember his original charge in California?
But this case is different.
Appreciate it. Bye.
Going back and forth, so we like to...
With murderers and sex offenders to hunt down, the 1962 escape from Alcatraz isn't Dyke's most pressing
If he
case.
tries to sneak across the border, there's a chance.
But it's still important to him.
Anytime there's a likelihood that someone's still alive and the case needs to be solved, you should never give up until it's done. The Marshal Service never gives up looking for people, no matter what. Nobody gets a free ride, that's for sure.
From his San Francisco office, Dyke digitizes thousands of old files and chases down the latest leads. Some believe he's chasing ghosts. But Dyke's meticulous investigation has shed new light on the Alcatraz escape. It's also caused him to revisit key assumptions about the case, going back to the very day of the breakout. On his morning rounds, a prison guard makes a shocking discovery.
We had a standing count at 7:30 in the morning.
Morris.
The officer went to wake him by slapping him on the head. The officer jumped back and said, "Oh my God, they cut his head off."
The spoon proves mightier than the bars at supposedly escape-proof Alcatraz prison. three bank robbers, Frank Morris and John and Clarence Anglin, scratched their way through grills covering an air vent, climbed a drainage pipe, and disappeared from the forbidding rock in San Francisco Bay. It appears to be the first successful escape in the history of the maximum security prison.
Author Jolene Babiak is the daughter of the associate warden from the time and was asleep in the family quarters when the alarm was raised.
Well, my first knowledge of the escape was the siren, which appeared in my dreams. My mother met me on the stairs and she said, "Get dressed, there's been an escape." And my first question was, "Do you think they're still here?" And she said, "Nah, they probably left last night."
Within hours, the FBI begins scouring the rocky coast and icy waters of the bay, assisted by the Coast Guard, the Army, and local police. But they find no trace of the escapees. A search of the missing prisoner cells reveals their route to freedom.
They came off the cell house up there, came down a pipe, came down through here, and they put the raft in the water.
Interviews with other inmates yield another surprise. A fourth conspirator, Alan West, is also in on the escape plan.
Wes was the sneakiest and the most dangerous. He was actually on Alcatraz twice.
But West doesn't dig through his cell in time to join the others.
Name? Alan West.
He tells the FBI that the escapees plan to take an unexpected route
It just didn't work out.
toward Angel Island, 2 miles north of Alcatraz, then cross to the mainland and steal a car.
That was the plan, to go to Angel Island.
Exactly.
Search teams swarm the area. But the only signs of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers are a paddle, 2 life jackets, and a small rubber packet containing photographs and notes. According to reports, the biggest piece of physical evidence, the prisoner's 2x4-meter raft, is never found, and no cars are reported stolen. Five weeks later, the FBI receives new information. A Norwegian freighter leaving the bay spots a body in the water.
They said it was face down, but it was wearing very light blue denim type pants and an AVP jacket.
The description is nearly identical to uniforms worn by Alcatraz prisoners. This telling report convinces many investigators that the escapees' raft failed, dumping them into a watery grave. But is there another possible ending to this story? In 1979, nearly 2 decades after the Alcatraz escape, the FBI hands off the unsolved case to the United States Marshals. The nation's oldest federal law enforcement agency has been catching fugitives for more than 2 centuries. The Marshals arrest over 100,000 fugitives annually. A surprising number of them have been on the run for years, even decades. But the Alcatraz case puts even the Marshals' prodigious skills to the test. And it raises questions about the original investigation, causing some to wonder if Frank Morris and the Anglins made it all the way to freedom. Michael Earp is the Marshals' Assistant Director of Investigations. A veteran of hundreds of escape cases, he knows the challenges of picking up a cold trail.
You start from the beginning. You take the case file, everything known at that time, and you review everything that you have. And you try to reconstruct in your own mind what was done back in those days. And you look for different investigative avenues that you think you might want to pursue that weren't pursued before.
When the Marshals inherit the Alcatraz case, the FBI reports aren't computerized.
You're now asking the FBI, okay, collect all the leads and all the reports, all the evidence and everything, box them up, and send it over to the Marshal Service. The reality of that is it took just about 2 years to get all the case files.
As deputies review the files, they are struck by what's missing from the picture. Any evidence that the fugitives had committed further crimes.
These guys were career criminals. They didn't know anything else but to commit crimes. They commit a big crime, they escape from Alcatraz, and all of a sudden there's nothing.
If Morris and the Anglins somehow survived the escape, could they keep clean after breaking the rock? Most investigators think not.
None of them showed up on any new violations. So that told me that these guys aren't around, they're dead.
For retired Assistant Director Art Roderick, who also worked the case, the deciding factor is the icy water of the bay.
To fight the tides and the cold water, which to me is probably the thing that did them in. I just think they didn't make it. They drowned in the bay and were swept out to the ocean.
If the prisoners headed north towards Angel Island, they faced roughly double the current than if they went south. In those choppy waters, their very survival depended on their raft.
If their raft did not sink, then I think it's very possible that 3 gentlemen paddling as hard as they can could have made it to Angel Island given what the currents were doing. To me, it ultimately comes down to whether they had a seaworthy vessel or not.
But that question is almost impossible to answer because the raft was never found. Or was it? Michael Dyke has uncovered new evidence that turns this most basic assumption on its head and suggests the fugitives may have beaten the odds after all. Today, Deputy U.S. Marshal Michael Dyke visits the National Archives at San Francisco.
Okay, thank you.
Here, massive storage rooms house the Alcatraz records. These files help build a profile of the inmates involved in the '62 escape. Frank Morris starts out as the original hard luck kid. An orphan bounced from one foster home to another. He lands in reform school at a tender age. In this early mugshot, he's just 14. But Morris is also highly intelligent, with an IQ in the top 3% of the population.
The records draw a picture of him as a guy who was above average intelligence, but also liked to get into trouble, probably because he was bored.
As he grows older, Morris settles into a pattern that will define his adult life. Bank heists, armed robberies, and incarcerations, followed by brazen escapes. By the time he's shipped to Alcatraz, Morris has earned a reputation as an escape artist.
The Anglin brothers were kind of the opposite of Morris. They weren't terribly bright, they were average. One of them had about a 5th grade education and the other one had a 3rd grade education.
They were stealing cars, stealing money, breaking into businesses, breaking into residences. They are listed as armed and dangerous as escapees, but there's not a lot of violence in their history.
The Alcatraz records paint a telling portrait of the escape artists as young men. But it's the thousands of other documents in the FBI files that contain a big surprise. 2 government documents never seen by the public before. If accurate, they change the history of the case. At the time, officials claimed a raft was never found. But this FBI teletype, dated June 12, 1962, the day after the escape, indicates clearly that a raft was recovered. The location? Angel Island. A day later, a U.S. government memorandum makes the same claim, but adds a startling detail. Footprints are spotted leading away from the raft. But if a raft was recovered, it was never entered into evidence. How that happened, and why these documents have only just surfaced, remains unknown. The June 13th memorandum also contains another bombshell. It's long been believed that no cars were reported stolen at the time of the Alcatraz escape. A key argument against the fugitive's survival. But the day after the escape, police departments in the Bay Area are on the lookout for a stolen car. According to the memo, a driver is forced off the road by 3 men in a blue Chevy. He phones the Highway Patrol in Stockton to complain. An incredible scenario starts to become plausible. If the raft holds together, the escapees reach Angel Island and hopscotch over the strait to the mainland. As dawn breaks, they steal a car. By the time their empty cells are discovered, they're already racing toward freedom. Together, these documents push Dyke toward a revolutionary conclusion.
A hunch is a hunch, it's an opinion, and my opinion is that there's a fairly high likelihood that at least two of them probably survived.
If Deputy Marshal Michael Dyke is correct, that two of the fugitives may have survived the Alcatraz escape, then what happened to the third? The Norwegian freighter's report of a floating corpse may offer a gruesome clue to his fate.
And about 8 months after the escape and 7 months after the body was seen floating, skeletal remains were found in early 1963 up at Point Reyes, which, according to studies on ocean currents, a lot of the currents would follow northward up there, and there's a possibility it could be the same body.
Are they the remains of one of the Alcatraz fugitives? Dyke may be able to answer the question, if he can find the bones.
Hey Debbie, Mike from the Marshals.
He heads to the Marin County Coroner's Office, where a report was logged in 1963. It tells him that the remains were buried in a local cemetery under the name John Bones Doe.
The advantage I have now that they didn't have in 1962 and 63 is I can dig the bones up and send them to a DNA lab and get DNA results from them.
But even a simple physical examination of the bones provides new information. The condition and lengths of the bones were carefully noted by the original medical examiner.
And those measurements gave the pathologist the conclusion that the person was approximately 67 1/2 inches in height, which just so happens to be the exact height of Frank Morris.
The similarity in height is tantalizing. But Dyke knows there's only one way to be certain if these remains belong to Frank Morris: DNA testing. He heads to the local cemetery to exhume the bones. But he has no idea if he'll actually find them or what their state of preservation will be.
Do you happen to know how many bodies that you ended up with here from 62, 63 time frame?
Yeah, there's 4 of them that are buried in this area here that are John Doe's from 62 to 64.
Okay. There we go.
Select the dog.
That's what we want.
That's one of them. All right.
Awesome.
Okay.
The Marin County coroners and I dug up the bones and delivered them to the DNA lab, and they will hopefully extract some DNA from them that we can use for comparison, a reference sample from a relative of the escapees. And I'll start with Frank Morris.
If Dyke can find a reference sample, then the DNA lab might be able to determine whether John Bones Doe is really Frank Morris. But if it was Morris who drowned, why him and not one of the brothers? During his time on Alcatraz, Morris builds a reputation as a loner. And rumor has it the Anglins don't like him. Perhaps as they paddle toward Angel Island, the brothers decide to go it alone. Once out of the raft, the dazed Morris stands little chance. He quickly succumbs to the cold water. If it was Morris who died, that explains why most reported sightings are of the Anglin brothers. Once, the two men are said to attend a family funeral dressed as women. Another report places them in a cabin on the remote property of a distant relative. Art Roderick once follows up a lead that makes him wonder if he is finally getting close to the truth.
We had received probably around a 6-page letter about how this person's relative had picked up the Anglin brothers at San Francisco Bay and had been paid to drive them up to an area in Seattle.
The driver gets as far as a park in the Seattle outskirts when he decides on another course of action.
This person had got it in his head that, hell, I'm going to go ahead and kill these guys, and apparently they had some cash on him and he was going to steal the money. They had him in the back of a van, kind of covered up. They opened the doors to the vehicle, and he ended up shooting them. And the story was they buried him right on that spot.
The unusual detail in the letter convinces Roderick to go and take a look. He leads a team of deputies on a hunt for the alleged burial site. Following precise directions, they manage to find the exact location. They start digging. But they never find a thing.
So it was a heck of a story, but it was all fiction.
Over the years, countless leads have come up empty. So have fingerprint searches and surveillance operations. But this latest lead, a set of long-buried skeletal remains,
well, the femur is mostly intact,
could be a major breakthrough. DNA testing may finally help reveal the fate of at least one of the Alcatraz escapees. Michael Dyke believes that these human remains could be all that's left of Alcatraz escape artist Frank Morris. The forensic lab has extracted DNA from the bones. But now, they need a comparison. Through painstaking research, Dyke has located a possible member of Morris's paternal family. He has agreed to donate a DNA sample. The lab will test to see if there's a match. But for now, Dyke must wait.
How you doing, Coon? How you doing, Coon? They're great.
5 decades ago, the bars of a prison cell separated inmate Darwin Coon and prison guard Pat Mahoney. Now, they meet again, just a few kilometers from Alcatraz.
Well, I'm so glad to see you.
Yes. Here's to that.
And there's not many of us left, is there?
No, there's not.
It's really getting short.
Like many Americans, the mystery of this daring prison escape still intrigues and divides them to this day.
I'd say the probably chance they didn't make it. The water is this water here is violent. That's why Alcatraz worked. It was the water.
My positive thinking is that John and Clarence Anglin and Frankie Morris, those three guys got away.
Whatever their fate, Morris and the Anglins had a far greater impact than they probably ever imagined. Their escape was a fatal blow to the credibility of the Rock.
Alcatraz, being what Alcatraz was, it was a real embarrassment to lose anybody.
Less than a year later, it was closed down as a federal prison.
It's hail and farewell to Alcatraz. Wearing handcuffs and leg irons, the last 27 of its 1,500 prisoners leave the crumbling, unsalvageable fortress for more modern federal penitentiaries.
As the books closed on once mighty Alcatraz, 3 men remained unaccounted for. Some 50 years later, these state-of-the-art computer-generated portraits show what the escapees might look like today. And the U.S. Marshals won't stop looking for them until the fugitives reach the age of 100.
In the Marshal Service, we don't close a case until we have absolute proof that we have the subject, dead or alive.
Today, Michael Dyke hopes to hear proof of his theory that Frank Morris did not survive the escape. The DNA test results are finally in.
Okay. Thanks, John. Bye. The DNA lab confirmed that the last DNA sample I sent did not match Frank Morris. I always assumed that was one of the options, but I was kind of hoping that it would not be because I wanted to close out part of the case.
If the bones aren't those of Frank Morris, it's possible that they belong to one of the Anglins. But it's also possible that the dead man was none of them. And that means the recently discovered memorandum could be correct. That the raft did survive the journey across the bay. Footprints were found leading away from the raft. A car was stolen. And the 3 men inside were the Alcatraz escapees. The real possibility that all 3 fugitives survived only makes Michael Dyke more determined than ever to hunt them down.
If I caught any one or all 3 of them, I would tell them, good job, it's a good run, but it's over.
Dyke's relentless investigation may one day lead to historic arrests. But for now, whatever happened to the Alcatraz escapees remains a mystery. Michael Dyke believes that these human remains could be all that's left of Alcatraz escape artist Frank Morris. The forensic lab has extracted DNA from the bones. But now, they need a comparison. Through painstaking research, Dyke has located a possible member of Morris's paternal family. He has agreed to donate a DNA sample. The lab will test to see if there's a match. But for now, Dyke must wait.
How you doing, Coon? How you doing, Coon? They're great.
5 decades ago, the bars of a prison cell separated inmate Darwin Coon and prison guard Pat Mahoney. Now, they meet again, just a few kilometers from Alcatraz.
Well, I'm so glad to see you.
Yes, yes. Here's to that.
And there's not many of us left, is there?
No, there's not.
It's really getting short.
Like many Americans, the mystery of this daring prison escape still intrigues and divides them to this day.
I'd say the probably chance they didn't make it. The water is just, this water here is violent. That's why Alcatraz worked. It was the water.
My positive thinking is that John and Clarence Anglin and Frankie Morris, those 3 guys got away.
Whatever their fate, Morris and the Anglins had a far greater impact than they probably ever imagined. Their escape was a fatal blow to the credibility of the Rock.
Alcatraz being what Alcatraz was, it was a real embarrassment to lose anybody.
Less than a year later, it was closed down as a federal prison.
It's hail and farewell to Alcatraz. Wearing handcuffs and leg irons, the last 27 of its 1,500 prisoners leave the crumbling, unsalvageable fortress for more modern federal penitentiaries.
As the books closed on once mighty Alcatraz, 3 men remained unaccounted for. Some 50 years later, these state-of-the-art computer-generated portraits show what the escapees might look like today. And the U.S. Marshals won't stop looking for them until the fugitives reach the age of 100.
In the Marshal Service, we don't close a case until we have absolute proof that we have the subject, dead or alive.
Today, Michael Dyke hopes to hear proof of his theory that Frank Morris did not survive the escape. The DNA test results are finally in.
Okay. Thanks, John. Bye. The DNA lab confirmed that the last DNA sample I sent did not match Frank Morris. I always assumed that was one of the options, but I was kind of hoping that it would not be because I wanted to close out part of the case.
If the bones aren't those of Frank Morris, it's possible that they belong to one of the Anglins. But it's also possible that the dead man was none of them. And that means the recently discovered memorandum could be correct. That the raft did survive the journey across the bay. Footprints were found leading away from the raft. A car was stolen. And the 3 men inside were the Alcatraz escapees. The real possibility that all 3 fugitives survived only makes Michael Dyke more determined than ever to hunt them down.
If I caught any one or all 3 of them, I would tell them, good job, it's a good run, but it's over.
Dyke's relentless investigation may one day lead to historic arrests. But for now, whatever happened to the Alcatraz escapees remains a mystery.